Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last and third webinar of YSI at COP28 in this webinar series that we are doing this year on the context of COP28. And this time we welcome you to this special meeting that is the moment after the COP, after everything that we leave on the ground. And we title this webinar From Reflection to Action. As usual, we share the agenda for today. Today, we will have this brief moment of welcome and introduction to share with you what to expect today. Then we will have with us Jay. You saw Jay in the previous webinars, commenting, asking questions. This time, we will have the privilege of having his opening remarks. He's the director of the Young Scholars Initiative. Then we will have a moment of presenting the main conclusions of COP28. And then we will start the panel with Q&A, where you will have the opportunity to hear a special guest that we have today that participated in COP28 to share with us the conclusions, reflections of the COP28, and you can ask your questions as well. And last, and very briefly, we will have the moment to conclude this webinar and this series of this year. So just as a recap, the first, second, and the third webinar, this year we did this series of 3 webinars, and it was the first time that we are doing this as YSI. The first webinar was done before COP, and it was around a path towards COP28. We had a special guest sharing with us about the process of COP, why COP is so important, and the expectations of the COP28. In the second webinar, it was done from the action zone of the food system pavilion in COP28, in the blue zone. And we had also, like Mateusz and I were sharing about our experience from the COP28. And we also had Sylvia joining us. And today, our webinar, it will be the after COP, so from the reflection to the action. So to start, I would like to invite the person that supported us from the beginning to make this possible, to participate in COP28. And he is Jay. He is the director of the Young Scholars Initiative. And we would like to hear your opening remarks of this last webinar. Jay, the word is yours. And the floor is yours.
Well, hello from Berlin. Thank you, Maria Virginia. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to say some opening remarks. And thank you for sharing also the vision statement of the Young Scholars Initiative, because I think the challenge that we have at hand as a global society is the most formidable challenge we've encountered since we can remember, at least since the Second World War, but maybe even worse because it involves the entire planet. I went through an exercise with my colleagues at INET in our weekly meeting of trying to formulate some specific thoughts that try to encompass how do we deal with this magnitude of problem. And I think we have to just fully also account for a couple of things that are very difficult to get our heads around, because we're here from reflection to action. And I think these two things, reflecting and taking action, have to be highly in touch with each other and in communication with each other and resonating with each other. So we have to be aware that we have more knowledge than ever on the research side. We have more data, we have more intellectual firepower thrown at the various challenges around the world, including the climate crisis, including the environmental crisis. We have evidence. The challenge that we have is, how do we bring these bodies of knowledge together? we have many systems in place. We have an economy in place. We have many systems in play, and they are all interacting with each other. And it's a very complex thing to understand at this point in time how these layers of systems are operating on top of each other. The world has already transformed massively over the last couple of decades. And what we're asking the economy and our societies to do is again to transform. And that is putting pressure on our cultures, it's putting pressure on our way of life and inducing a lot of fears and anxieties, just like globalization did already in the previous periods. So this is a problem that amounts to a complexity that no one person can understand and that no one person can solve, and requires true coordination, true collective action, all the things that we know are very, very difficult to achieve. So we have to do everything at once, which is the global coordination has to happen with a very good insight about how all these various systems work on an individual basis and how they interact with each other. And we're talking about power to navigate this, not just to start the process, but to sustain a process of transformation. And that is difficult beyond anybody's imagination. It requires a true transformation in consciousness, I believe, a willingness to keep learning and listening, to keep working while we haven't solved the problem. And I think we need to have a broad vision together to want to have this planet habitable for us together. So that's the positive, but we also need to be careful that these complexities might lead us to not be able to achieve, let's say, the goals that we've set ourselves as a global community. We will not, certainly, it's less and less likely the more time goes by and the less progress we make. And we'll hear now what the progress was at COP28. But I think we should also prepare for less good outcomes, for less what happens in those bad scenarios. So I think I promised I would keep this brief. I want to simply encourage us to go beyond our comfort zone in our thinking and in our actions. We tend to try to, in most of our human experience, try to go where we're familiar, where we know things, and that is super important. We need to keep that in the game. We have to go to unfamiliar places, get to know other experiences, understand where the resistances are, and try to form a truly global coalition that goes beyond political agendas, narrow interests, with a truly inclusive agenda. That sounds wonderful on paper, and we've all worked on this in various ways. We have all kinds of formats that are trying this, but the challenge at hand is more than needed right now. So in conclusion, what I've talked about is we have an incredibly complex problem that with many, many angles to try to solve that problem. We have many experts, many pieces of the puzzle in our hands. How to actually solve the problem and go to action is incredibly difficult because that will spur unintended, unknown consequences that we cannot foresee just yet. So we have to keep listening, keep learning as we transform, which I hope we will do. And it will come with resistances that we have to address those two. It's not a technocratic exercise. It's truly a holistic exercise that has to take on many more dimensions than we typically do in narrow research or narrow policy making. Only that way can we actually achieve our objective. I hope that was enough of an opening statement to spur the debate. We have a formidable challenge, and we're here to talk about how we can achieve it. Marie-Virginie, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jay. Thank you for all your words. And now we want to dedicate this time for those guests that are coming today and joining us. And I would like to first pass the word to Mateusz, who will moderate this part of the webinar. First, Mateusz will give will share with you some conclusions of COP28, and then he will be introducing and moderating the moment of the panel. So thank you, Jay. Thank you, Mateusz, and I pass it to you.
Thank you, Maria Virginia, and hello, everyone. I understand we will soon be seeing a screen that will be shared, outlining key conclusions from COP28 that we would like to be sharing with you or drawing your attention to in this session. We could spend a lecture, if not more, talking about various conclusions from the COP. We wanted to draw your attention to what we believe are the most important to start with. And then that's why you have so many links on this page. You can go deeper if you want, and you are warmly invited to do that. That's why we included the link, so that we can, as the name of the webinar is saying, and as Jay was encouraging us to do, we are invited. We don't have to, but we are invited to take action. And that's a very, very warm invitation from the COP itself and from our webinar today as well. So to structure it, the main conclusions from the COP, the main conclusion, the first one, is that we do have an agreement. Parties to the convention, countries that are parties to UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, have reached an agreement that emerged out of COP28. And this agreement signals, as Secretary General of the United Nations said, beginning of an end of the fossil fuel era. And if you only look at the headlines and look at this one as your first and only insight into the COP, you could be thinking, oh, not much has been achieved. And we'll talk in our discussion with our three panelists in just a few minutes more about that. But together with Maria Virginia, we've been at the COP, and that was not our first COP this year. So we know what is the effort and process from both the negotiator, the official negotiators of different parties to the convention, as well as other actors, non-state actors, putting pressure, encouraging, and doing all sorts of work at the COP physically and before and after the COP to inform, influence, encourage this agreement. So while you might be disencouraged and while the media might be saying, hey, we haven't achieved as much as we could have achieved, our perspective is that a lot has been achieved, and a lot more that is not included in the official documents because it couldn't be included for political reasons, has been done, and there's a tremendous progress year on year. I think this is the perspective that we have coming out of the COP that we would like to highlight here. So once again, there was an agreement reached. You have the link with all the official COP documents that you can go into. One thing or two speeches that we would like to draw your particular attention to are very short, actually, statements of both the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, in which he is outlining a lot of the topics that Jay mentioned, like, hey, we are on the path, we can get there, but it depends on how fast we act and how well we collaborate with each other, and whether that is happening in a just manner or not so much, which of course we are invited for this to happen in a just manner. So go to Secretary General's statement to dig deeper. Also, UNFCCC is led by Simon Steele, who also made a closing speech at COP28, and you have that linked up. Very short speech, very, very to the point. You are encouraged to go there as a follow-up to this webinar. What happened at the COP when it comes to official successes and official processes and official documents are two things that we would like to draw your particular attention to on top of the official outcome of the COP official statement. That first thing we draw your attention to is the first global stocktake. So as agreed at COP21 in Paris, that COP that signed Paris Agreement, the famous Paris Agreement, this year was a year of a stocktake of how are we doing when it comes to our climate commitments. Are we on track? Are we not? What do we have to do in order to get there on time. It is not surprising, I think, to anyone here that we are not on track to achieve net zero by 2050 and limit and adapt to impacts of climate change. But at least now we have the numbers telling us where we are. And this is exactly what happened at the first global stocktake, which is, when it comes to the numbers, not very encouraging, but when it comes to the process that actually took place, fairly encouraging. And a second thing we would like to draw your particular attention to, which was a big success, pre-cooked at the COP and announced early on at the COP, is the famous loss and damage mechanism, called formally Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, because it was agreed firstly at COP taking place in Warsaw, Poland, and now it's substantiated with further agreement. So countries agreed to put money to this mechanism, and a lot made those commitments with billions raised. Huge success emerging out of COP. Of course, more could be done and more will be done. We are fairly sure about that, but nevertheless, a reason to celebrate. The second part of conclusions that we would like to spend some time on is food and agriculture. I am a farmer. Maria Virginia is running Farm of Francesco. I'm running European Carbon Farmers, so we are particularly interested in food and agriculture. Similarly to other sectors of economy that were discussed and worked on when it comes to the COP or in the COP process, agriculture was part of those discussions. A lot has happened. Some of the key successes is the COP28 UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action that was initially signed at the beginning of the COP around 30th of November by 130-something parties or countries. At the end, right now, it's signed by 159 parties. So basically, not really, but almost all of the countries of the world signed this declaration, and a tremendous success, opening a lot of doors for further work to actually implement what is written in this declaration. Building on that, or simultaneously, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, released this toolkit that you also have linked up, which is showing parties, countries, how to report their nationally determined contributions when it comes to food systems. So very important technical tool to actually get to this high-level political ambition shared by 159 parties. For you to have the last link on this slide, all announcements, including those that we've just shared with you, and there are a lot of announcements made by countries, made by companies, made by coalitions, made by NGOs, you name it, are listed on official UNFCCC website, which you have the link to in this slide that will be shared with you after the webinar. And of course, no, but we know where COP29 will be hosted and when, from the 11th to the 22nd of November next year in Azerbaijan, COP29, and Brazil will be COP30 host from the 10th to the 21st November 2025. So keep those dates in mind, and we are already on the path of getting there, especially Brazil, simultaneously with being G20 leader right now, host, is having big ambitions that you might have heard about on moving from ambition to action and closing some of the gaps that are still remaining. So those are not all, but what we thought are the key conclusions from COP28 that we wanted to share with you. Much more for you there to dig into, with starting with the links that we are sharing on this slide for you. And with this one, I will slowly stop talking and invite our three panelists on stage. We have Aritra, that we were hoping to see with us in the second webinar, but he couldn't join us back then. He is now with us. So Aritra, welcome, and it's amazing to have you with us. You are part of YSI community. We have Marinel, that we also met at the COP, and Marinel is an Argentinian doing amazing work that Maria Virginia met at Unleash, one of conferences that brought them together, and Marinel will introduce her soon. So welcome, Marinel. You might be leaving us soon as well, because you are at the airport traveling. So even bigger thank you for joining us. And we have Barend, a farmer that was present at the COP, whom we met thanks to Farmers Constituency. And then we've done a lot of things together as part of Food Systems Pavilion, where Francesco and European Carbon Farmers were one of the co-hosts of, farmer co-hosts of. So really happy to have you with us, Barend, and thank you for joining us. Sorry, Marinel, I made some mistakes confusing you with another person that I met through Maria Virginia recently. So my bad. And with that, I will let you speak first, and then we'll take it to Aritra and Barend with two questions. Firstly, introduce yourself briefly to all the three of you, and what is one key conclusion or outcome emerging from the COP for you? What is the key conclusion from the COP28 that emerged for you, for your work? Marinel, over to you, and I'm sorry for the mistakes I made.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Matthews, and hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Marinel Ugardo. I am from the Philippines. I am a climate justice activist. We've met with Virginia a couple of times at COP and even here in the US. I'm currently based in the US doing my master's in environmental management at Duke University. So yes, I'm still actually, honestly, I'm still trying to recover from COP. But I feel like COP has been a lot this year, especially because, as we know, those who went, the event venue was really, really big, to the point that if you stay for the whole 2 weeks, it just burns you out and drains you. Yeah, but I was very excited to be there. I think my main takeaway is that I celebrate the transitioning away from fossil fuel text in the global static. I think it was great that they made sure that there is a revision to the draft that we received before the final text has been released after COP. I think it was a really great accomplishment that the first day of the COP they have adopted the operationalizing the loss and damage fund. It's always it's always hard to say that, but anyway, but I think in this time of climate crisis, I think we could have done better. And I know it is a very great accomplishment already. It is a historic that it is not just facing down as what we had in COP26, but it is actually transitioning away with an equal and equitable approach. And I think that's really big. But in the era of climate crisis, I felt that the transitioning away text has just been put in there because of the contentions of because of all the issues and contentions from different vulnerable nations and different participants of COP28. So it has been put in there. I felt that it was still very shallow, that it really didn't put into words how to specifically transition away from fossil fuel. It's still very broad to me. And I would have loved it if it wasn't that broad. I also didn't support that the text was passed without Samoa and Oasis, who was there, or Oasis, who wasn't there during the passing of the global static. And I echo what you said, Matthews. It is great and it is very historic. I'm just saying that in an era of climate change and these times where we are in the climate crisis, it would have been great if what does it see how transitioning away look like, in the standpoint of the UN and even UAE as as the host of COP28. How are they going to transition away, knowing that they are one of the oil producing country in the whole world, and having having the COP29 in Azerbaijan? I couldn't still fathom how that text will move forward, and how the negotiation will actually advance in COP29. And
Thank you for that,
and
Marinel. Big points there. I'm taking away the biggest success for you is passing of the loss and damage fund, which you also highlighted as one of the key outcomes, and very big questions that we'll get to partly as this webinar goes ahead of, hey, what is to be done, what are you doing, and also think, dear participants, as well about those questions. What will you be doing till COP29 because of what happened at COP28, and what is your biggest expectation for the future that maybe was not yet fulfilled with COP28? So that's that. At this point, let me invite Aritra to share with us two things. Briefly introduce yourself, Aritra, and what is the major outcome of the COP from your perspective, for your work, for the perspective that you have, that you are most happy with or proud of, or whatever the feeling there is. And to our participants, feel free to keep the questions, the comments, and so on coming through the chat to us, so that we can make this as participatory as possible. Over to you, Aritra.
Thank you. And firstly, thanks, Maria, for having me here for the third panel. I couldn't make it for the second panel because I was still in between time zones, and I really lost track of whether I'm in Dubai or in the US at that point. And thanks, Jay, for the opening remarks. I think that was a perfect tone to set the stage where we are right now. A bit about myself. I am a PhD scholar in energy and environment policy in the US. I'm studying at Michigan Technological University. I'm a third-year PhD student, and my area of focus is gender and energy policy and climate policy, which is why I was at COP. This was my second attendance at COP. First was in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh. And I also have been following the outcome of loss and damage fund in terms of reading the official text, starting from Sharm and following through the text that has been released by the transitional committee throughout the year in terms of the meetings they've had. I think they've had 4 meetings. Yeah. I would like to actually, in my opinion, I would like to focus on not the outcomes, but the processes that is leading to the outcomes here. We have to realize that we are right now in a multipolar world, and it is no surprise that there are several blocks of power. Each block of power has its own interest, and there's always some give and take happening in the negotiation rooms. I was lucky to be part of one negotiation room, which was on gender and climate change. It was the subsidiary body meeting on subsidiary body of implementation. And you can see how each country negotiates every word of the text that we see finally as an outcome as the official document. So what I'm trying to point out here is that each text carries a value which is different for different parties. What gender means to the US is different. What gender means to the Philippines is different. What gender means to Brazil, so on and so forth. Similarly, the use of fossil fuels and the phasing out of fossil fuels or the phasing down of fossil fuels has a different implication. So even if we read the official document as a very unbiased document, the repercussions or the actions that each party will take is different given the context. So in that regard, I should say that because there is no legal mandate binding all these parties together to the convention, we have to clearly understand that. If at some point any party wants to back out, there's no legal repercussion to that party. So the fact that we have reached this far through a narrative that is common to all, that binds all of us together, is tremendous, given the power struggles each party has with each other. And in that sense, I feel the loss and damage fund is a truly remarkable outcome. Yes, does it fall short of its target? Yes. Is it still ambiguous in how the parties will get the disbursements? Yes. Uh, is having World Bank as the authority to monitor the fund contentious? Yes. But all of these contentions are a result of the actions. We cannot give away the kind of process we are in right now, because the alternative is to leave all the decisions to one party or to a group of parties, and we know what has happened in the past with that.
Mhm.
That's
So
that's
the
the most.
biggest outcome for you, Aritra, is
Sorry.
the biggest outcome of the COP for you is
Yeah, the biggest outcome is how all the parties have come together to the financial commitment to the loss and damage fund.
superb. So I hear loss and
Yeah.
damage fund for the second time. Maybe you were
Yes.
surprised as Barend. Same question to you, that will not come as a surprise at all, and invitation to our participants to share their thoughts, questions, and so on in the chat. Introduce yourself, Barend, and what is the biggest outcome of the COP for you?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I attended COP28 as a member of SI, the Southern Africa Agri Initiative. It's a family farmer network in Southern Africa as part of the World Farmers Organization delegation to COP28. It was my first COP, so it's quite an overwhelming experience if you attend it for the first time. Maybe I can say, to me, there's basically two takeaways. The first is that there is a massive disconnect and a massive gap between the world of abundance and the world of need. So it's very different if you are from a place where there's stable water and electricity supply and a lot of food, and it's very different if you are from a place where you do not have reliable electricity supply, if at all, if you do not even have proper infrastructure and access to food. The one bit that leaves me positive about COP is the focus on food and agriculture, which is great. The bit that we must yet see is for farmers to play the role that they should play. But if we are saying this is a process, then we can say, well, at least if we are talking about food and agriculture and we are beginning to position this closer to the center, we hope that in this process, farmers will also get the right place around the table. And why is farmers so important? Because farmers, I always say, farmers are literally in touch with nature. That is where we are every day. So farmers, of course, can have a very big and positive impact if we get the opportunity. But it is a bit concerning that there is discussions about agriculture and about food production, but you don't have the food producers around the table. So to me, that is the at least in the declaration on food, farmers are specifically mentioned, and family farmers are mentioned, which is great. If you read the global stocktake, they actually acknowledge many stakeholders, but they do not acknowledge specifically the contribution that farmers are making and can make. So to me, that is the key takeaways. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you, Barend, and thank you everyone for highlighting the successes and saying, which is very much the first question we will be sharing with our participants. What are the gaps that are still to be bridged? That was very, very clear in all of your statements. So why don't we go with you, Aritra, as the first one to take the second question, which is how are you working and structuring your work till COP29 and possibly beyond? Because there's a lot of conversation about getting things to COP30 with Brazil's leadership that is there. What, if you know, and if you reflected, because maybe it's still too early for you to say or for us to say that, but what is your key priority number one for COP29? that you are, having there, thanks to how COP28 went? And that's the question to all of our three panelists.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'll also admit that I'm still in very much a flux. And as like everyone, it's difficult to process all the outcomes as it is coming out. But like I've said, and I've said it to many people, that pick a topic of COP and follow it diligently throughout. And for me, it has been the loss and damage fund in terms of mitigation and adaptation, in terms of how it will actually play out in climate change mitigation and adaptation scenario. And I feel, in a way, I feel that having the next COP in Azerbaijan, I'm still on the edge in terms of whether it will actually happen because of logistical reasons, not for anything else, if Azerbaijan will have the capacity. But having the next COP also in an Eastern European bloc, which has a history of fossil fuels, sets the stage to understand where do we go forward, and can we actually deliver on the phasing down commitment. I think for me, that is the main topic to be looking out for.
And do you want, or can you go like deeper for 1 minute about how will you do that? Like, you have this worry, how do we deliver on the phasing out? Do you have something specific in mind that you will do, or maybe not do, that you thought about doing, but now you will not be doing because the worry is there, and you want to ensure that the phase out actually happens?
In my capacity, I always look, as I said, I always pay attention to the text, the official text, and what are the implications of the text for the well, my region of research is the Global South. So I pay specific attention to how the text impact the Global South. So in my capacity, I'll still continue to look at what the text implies in terms of, let's say, for India, how India is gonna deliver official commitments on what are the steps they're going to take to phase down fossil fuels.
Very clear. And what I'm also taking away from what you are saying, and I think we can draw it as an insight for all of those who are interested in getting involved and be impactful, is follow the official negotiations. Like, advocacy is really important, and probably that's your starting point. But if you really want to have an impact, there is the official stuff that is happening that is much more political. Get engaged there, because this is where the change really happens, especially when you get drawn into government sooner than what you think, which is like some of the personal stories that I know from colleagues who work at the COP, firstly being like, hey, we have to raise the level of ambition. Now they are ministers actually negotiating those agreements. So thank you, Aritra, and thank you for going deeper. Marinel, will go with you as the last one, just because I don't want to let Barend go last for the second time in a row. So over to you, Barend, right now. How is your work till COP29 structured, thanks to how COP28 went and your experience at the COP28?
Matthias, maybe I can do a bit of a strange thing, and I can say I want to just want us to reflect on a quote from a movie. And I actually watched this on the plane back to South Africa, and it's in The Hobbit, where Gandalf says, "The small things matter." And so I attended a couple of really great side events by Region 10, Common Land, Agriculture Partners, 1,000 landscapes for 1 billion people. And the one thing that I gathered was, I'm really convinced that the landscapes approach to the restoration of landscapes is really an excellent approach to follow. That is what we are doing, where we are working in the deep rural areas of South Africa, where we do agricultural development projects. So in my mind, I think what we must do is we must continue to do the right thing the right way, because if everybody does that, we will get to where we need to go. But you are also correct that we also need to make use of the opportunities, which is now available to non-party stakeholders to give input. And for example, again, you do not see landscapes approach that specifically. You do not, those words you do not find in text yet. And of course, connected to that is, if you don't find that approach in the official texts, it also means that it will be difficult to obtain the necessary funding when following that approach. And that is also an approach that actually requires special funding, because it's a special approach that considers the whole of the landscape. You are talking about longer periods of investment, for example. So my focus will, maybe I can say the focus will still be on a landscapes approach, but I will be also taking my time to think, how can we get that specific approaches more accepted and then finally into text, because following that, the other mechanisms will also follow, or the other processes like finance. Thank you.
Very, very clear, and also very clear opportunity once again to bridge the gap. Like, hey, there is something there. We are on the right path. We are doing that already, but then there's opportunity to show leadership, and thank you for that. Thank you to you all, and also to the participants, because we clearly are showing, you all are showing leadership by being here, asking questions, sharing your experiences, going to the COP, following the topic, that this is a space that can deliver transformation. And I think we are all doing what we can to make this happen, not for this to be potential, but for this to be true. So Marinel, very curious to hear your thoughts and insights on what is your priority for COP29 until COP29 that has been informed by what happened and what did not happen maybe at COP28.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think for me, so in the lead up to COP28, we had a Make Rich Polluters Pay campaign, which builds on from the study that was actually released in COP28, that there are just 1% of population who is responsible for 16% of the global carbon emission, and that is the rich people, and they have to be taxed so we can put more funding into loss and damage, because we all know that 725 million for losses and damages is just a cent compared to what we actually need for losses and damages and for reparation to vulnerable communities. If we can remember Super Typhoon Haiyan, which is the strongest typhoon ever recorded in human history, which landfall in the Philippines in 2013, the damages on that typhoon was already 2 billion. And with the increasing amount of tragic climate disasters that we are experiencing around the world, 725 million is not just enough to really cover the damages and the losses of the climate disasters in just even one country. And 725 million was not enough 10 years ago. It wasn't enough 20 years ago. It was not enough a year ago. It is not enough today, and it will not be enough tomorrow or next year. And so we have to continue advocating and campaigning so these rich polluters must actually pay. And our governments around the world, especially United States, those who are emitting that much, to really contribute much money into the loss and damage funding. I mean, 10.5 million contribution from the US is nothing. 10 million from Japan is nothing compared to how they are emitting and how they are getting much of the carbon allowances of the vulnerable nations for their own countries to develop. And I think that's the way forward for me, is to continue on with the campaign and making rich polluters pay, and campaigning so big countries will put more funding into loss and damage.
Very clear as well, and like just like Aritra said, what I'm hearing in your points, Marinel, is similar, right? Like pick the topic that is of focus. So I'm not surprised to see like, hey, loss and damage found the biggest success. What I'm focusing on is exactly that, and this is what I'm doing to take that forward. Either a lot to take it to completely new level, hopefully, or move it in the right direction, to not lose momentum. Grateful for the questions that are coming in. Please keep them coming, more of them. And if I can pick up on what you said, Marinel, and connect that with some of the comments that were made in the chat as we are speaking with each other. I know some of our panelists, I'm not sure, but participants are citizens of the United States of America, and we seem to have a consensus in the chat that, hey, you do have to lead as a big emitter as the United States to transform or transition your economy away from fossil fuels to renewables. This is what Joel, hello Joel, is sharing in the chat. And then you add this dimension of going out of your own economy to provide funding for transformation somewhere else, which is what Loss and Damage Fund is all about. So thank you for those comments in the chat. And we do have a question to you, Barend, from Christina. Hi, Christina. Which is firstly thanking you for what you shared about the landscape approach. And Christina would like to know how this approach, landscape approach, is contextualized for land redistribution in the South African context. And for those of the participants that might not know much about land redistribution, maybe it's worth to mention something about land redistribution and then answer the question, how is that approach used in that context that we will learn about in a second. So over to you, Barend, and then maybe if you, Christina, want to join us here as well to follow up with Barend or comment, that opportunity is available there for you as well. So Barend, over to you.
This is a question that actually requires a lot of contextualization. But maybe I can just say that our government have got many different programs to improve access to land for people that had limited access to land previously. So maybe I can just simplify it like that because it's a very complicated matter. What we are unfortunately seeing is where people are gaining access to land, and this is now very specifically agricultural land. We do not see that agricultural land being used very productively. And that is partly because, of course, land is valuable, but land do not produce something on its own. You need lots of inputs and, of course, the correct knowledge to take a piece of land and then to actually do something with that land. And it's already an effort simply to produce something to eat, and it's a lot more effort, and it takes a lot more knowledge and resources to actually produce a surplus on such a piece of land. Now, I think key to the landscapes approach is that you need to say, you need to look at it as a whole. You need to look at the landscapes as a whole. It's not only about land, it's not only about nature. In a typical landscape, you've got a piece that is nature, then you've got a piece that is human, and then typically you have also you've got an area of, let's say, a mix between nature and humans. And of course, unfortunately, the reality is that we are sitting with many areas in South Africa where we really need to restore nature. Just one example is we've got very big challenges with erosion, especially in the areas where it's actually high potential agricultural production areas, but you sit with massive erosion in that beautiful soils. And the whole point is, if you want to restore nature the right way, but at the same time, and I think this is key, we've got a challenge with a lack of opportunities, job opportunities, especially for young people. We've got lots of areas where we really do have not sufficient food supply. And the reality is that hungry people simply do not think about anything else. It's a simple reality. So when you go to the deep rural areas, our aim when we do agricultural development is we believe that the subsistence and smallholder farmers that are there, they need to modernize, they need to mechanize, they need to commercialize so that they can not only produce enough food to eat, but so that they can also produce a surplus that can be sold so that they can improve the standard of living. But the great opportunity that exists is to do this in a way that is in harmony with nature. So we need to understand, we need to find harmony between nature and culture, and agriculture is uniquely positioned to do exactly that. I hope that at least partially answered the question.
You are not only a great farmer, Barend, but also great educator, which is what YSI is in big part about. So thank you for bringing us on board on land redistribution issue and putting that in the context of landscape approach and showing a way forward. As a farmer, I cannot agree more that agriculture is very big part of the solution for a lot of the things that we are discussing here and discussing at the COP. It's not the only part of the solution, but it is critical part of the solution. We have a lot of great questions and insights coming through different channels my way. So I will leave the script that we have prepared with one other question that was shared with the panelists before. And I will ask this very challenging, I think, but from our experience as Farmer Francesco, the most critical question to turn work at the COPs and around the COPs to a new level. And this question is the following: which group is the one that you, the three of you, didn't want to get engaged with so far at all, and you realize you need to start engaging with that group in order to make a change, in order to close this gap that we are talking about, in order to move us from, you know, the level of ambitions being there, but then the actions not following, and us being in this limbo that Jay was mentioning today and mentioning in other webinars. So once again, the question to the three of you, very challenging one. Looking forward to your answers. What is the group that you didn't want to engage with at all, but you need to engage with that group because you want to drive the change, you want to make this change true? Marinel, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I don't think there is really a group that I don't want to engage in, because I truly believe that whatever sector you are in, whatever field you are involved with, climate crisis is affecting us in so many ways than we can imagine. And even if people think that they are in the US or in Europe, climate change is you can feel the effect of climate change even in your own backyard. So I feel like we have to compromise and we have to involve everyone. It just doesn't work now that we point fingers to people and we don't talk to people just because we think they're bad people or they're bad organization. I think we are innately as humans, we are good as humans, and I truly believe in that. And even if we do other things that we don't agree on, there are still other compromise that we could make. So as much as possible, I talk to a lot of people. I understand their points. I speak what I think is right for me as well, in a way that we would understand each other's points of view and try to compromise how we can work together to solve the climate crisis, because I think we really need to be in this together, and we should stop antagonizing other people because of, well, some people, you know, are worthy to be antagonized, but I think it's very, especially the big polluters, but I do think there could be a compromise in that.
If I knew I will hear what I have heard, I would ask you to go last, because that's a perfect way of closing. And thank you for your approach. Thank you for leaving it. And thank you for what I hear as building bridges and doing that in a proactive way. Without me saying much more, because I'm clearly excited right now, Aritra, over to you, and then to you, Barend. The question is, which group, if any, you really did not want to engage with at this COP or before this COP, and you realize you need to, and you make a decision of doing that engagement, of being open for that relationship for whatever reason. Over to you, Aritra.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there is no better way than to top what Marinel has said. And I'll just piggyback on her response as well. Like, I have never thought of not engaging with any group. My selection of engagement with the group has been guided by to select one topic out of the chaos that happens at COP. COP is a chaotic event. It is unimaginable the level of chaos that happens at the highest level of this at the highest level of this conference. So you possibly cannot be engageful to every topic of interest. You have to trust and understand the process that whatever topic of engagement you choose has its connections with every other topic. With loss, like for example, even loss and damage, its repercussions on mitigation and adaptation has repercussions on the way we do agriculture, the way we do livelihood, the way livelihoods will change once fossil fuel industries phase out. So everything is interconnected. So if we only do our part with sincerity and with integrity in this combined agenda, I think there is no way that you're leaving any group out.
Very, very, very good. Thank you. I mean, good is not the word I've been looking for, but the best one that I had available on my tongue. Thank you, Aritra. Barend, same question to you. Was there any group that you really did not want to engage with at or before the COP, and then you realized, no, I really need to engage with that group because we are talking about actions and not only commitments?
Yeah, I think farmers are really practical people, so we do not like to limit ourselves. So I can just echo and say there's no reason for us to, before the time, say this is people we do not want to speak to. I think and there might be a couple that I really would like to speak to, but maybe I can, because there's also limited time, I will just name one. And this is the people that are very specifically focused on nature and the environment. Maybe I can, it's a bit difficult to generalize, but let's say we need to find farmers and environmentalists. They need to speak to each other. Because the farmers I know are people that really do care about nature. And farmers and farming is part of the solution. Farming is not a nature unfriendly practice, especially the way where we are. So I think there is a very important conversation that needs to happen between farmers and the environmental protection community. And maybe I can just, why this is specifically important, just as a practical example, in South Africa, we've got the freedom and the privilege to farm with wild animals. We've got wildlife ranchers, and the practical outcome of that is that we've got double the amount of wild animals in private ownership when you compare it to the animals in public reserves, for example, official reserves that protect the animals. So I just think key for me is farmers and environmental protection people. We need to speak because the solution is in both of the groups.
And I'm very happy to know that this is happening in big part. Thank you for being part of that happening, and thank you for also bringing a very specific example to share with us of in South Africa this is happening. I'm sure it could be happening more or whatever, but like the pieces are there. And similarly in Poland, which is where I'm from, and I know same in Argentina where Maria Virginia is from. So on my end, before I switch to Maria Virginia in 30 seconds, thank you to Aritra, Barend, and Marinel in alphabetical order for joining us, for the work they've been doing, and for sharing a lot of that work, but definitely not all of that work with us. Work for the COP29 starts even before COP28 ends, and at least right after COP28 ends or ended. So we are already there on the path to COP29 and beyond. And I'm sure Barend, Aritra, and Marinel are there for you to keep you informed, to collaborate, cooperate, and all of that in the areas that they've mentioned: loss and damage fund, nature and agriculture, speaking with each other, but also other areas that are of interest to you, not necessarily to one of them or to me, but as we talked, they are all connected, so by default they are of our interest. Once again, thank you to our three panelists, and over to Maria Virginia for closing us off and wishing us Merry Christmas.
Thank you, everyone, for the panelists and also for those that joined. I was hearing all of you, and Marinel, when she was sharing, I remember someone I met in the same time I met Marinel, actually. That was Norman Wirsman, if I'm pronouncing his name right. He wrote this book that is called The Agrarian Spirit. And in YSI, we like books, so that's why I'm showing also the book, really, really nice book. And he says always that the climate change is everything change. So listening to the conversation today, I really remember on this. And we really believe that this webinar, we call it Reflection to Action, because the path to COP29 already started. It started in the COP28 itself. And we really trust that we are going to do more engagement, engaging more of the Young Scholar Initiatives community, so we can take these webinars out and build on this and make this webinar be not the last of these three, but the first of our path towards COP29. So we invite all of you that are new to the Young Scholar Initiatives community to go to the website, to become a member, to stay in touch, and also to stay in touch with us as Farm of Francesco. You can send us an email to hello@francescofarm.com, and let's be united. As the three panelists were saying very much, we really need to start engaging with each other. It doesn't matter which group we are from, so we can build this path together. Thank you very much, everyone, and we wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Goodbye.